Okay.
Well, Jim, let's start with your name and where and when were you born?
Okay. My name is
Yep,
Jim.
over here. Over here.
Oh, look
yeah,
at
yeah,
you.
Yeah, don't worry about the camera.
Okay. My name is Jim VanNorstrom. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in September 23rd, 1920.
Now, I understand that you, actually, when you got into the military, you were part of the ski patrol. The mountain.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about that.
But I went through Signal Corps training first.
Okay.
Signal Corps basic. I joined the Army from Penn State, where I was drafted, and opted for the Signal Corps. And they said, well, what's your background? I said, I worked in the photographic department, and I went to night school to learn photography. Oh, we'll put you in the Signal Corps School on Long Island, which was the old Paramount Studios at one day. So I went through that course, and then I had an option then, so I opted. I was learning to ski. I wanted to ski. So I opted for the ski troops, and they were in Colorado, up near Leadville, way up there. So I was one of the three photographers at Camp Hale for almost a year, and I loved it. And I was with a rugged bunch of guys. They were all canoers and soccer players and rugby players and so on. And there was a lot of fun with a lot of real tough work, because it was at that altitude in snowstorms and overnight trips and stuff. It could be very tough. But then one day they said, well, you're all going to Texas to be in the infantry. And it was like a punch in the belly to these guys. And immediately up and down my table, where I was sitting drinking a beer, the guy said, geez, I'm going to paratroops. That has a higher priority, and I qualify. And one other guy that I remember said, I'm going to OCS. I qualified for Officers Candidate School. And I thought, Jesus, what can I do? Then I remembered my dear brother, First Lieutenant, commanded a small Signal Corps unit up at Gowan Field. And I called him and told him my sad story, and I said, you know what I've been doing, you know, my training and everything, and I'll outline it to a letter to the photographic officer up there. If you'll talk to him. Oh, he said, I know him, and I'll see if he has an opening. He did have an opening. And the main reason he took me, because he didn't have to train me. And so that was my instigation into the 461st Bomb Group at Boise, which is a beautiful little village at that time. Then from there on, we went to Hammerfield, Fresno, California, for final phase training.
Now, this was a big base. This place was big, but it was in the process of being built, wasn't it? The base at Fresno.
Oh, well, I never thought of it that way. Maybe there was work going on,
Okay.
but
Well, where were you assigned in Fresno? Where were you, in a barracks?
yeah.
Okay.
I lived in barracks. I think I was as a corporal then,
Okay.
private or corporal. I forget where that changed. And
Well, what did they tell you that you were supposed to be doing there?
well, in the photo department,
Okay.
at the photo lab, which it took included taking of ground pictures, processing, making prints, and delivering them. That's
Okay.
what it consisted of.
Okay. Now, this is going to sound really stupid, but remember, this is for future generations. What was the purpose of the photo group? What was you supposed to be accomplishing?
Well, eventually, when we got into combat, we were to photograph the bombing record of each flight, or one flight in a squadron at least. And that was supposed to be an automatic thing. The gunners were it ran off of a 24-volt line in the ship, so it was electric. The gunners were supposed to turn that on and go back to their watch on the waist at the two waist gunners. And then at the end, they'd be processed, prints made, delivered to the chief bombardier, chief navigator, and Colonel Glansberg.
Okay.
But it didn't work out that way, like a lot of things in wartime. after 2 missions, we had no pictures of the mission, see. One
Why?
way, well, because the gunners didn't get the pictures. See, the camera is mounted in a well in the bottom. They call it a well. The camera's quite big boxy thing like this, but very good and delivers very sharp prints at altitude, like 20,000 feet, 22,000.
I've seen them. They're
you
amazing.
damn near see
Yeah.
a golf ball down there.
Yeah.
So, anyway, for one reason or another, without blaming anybody, they didn't have pictures, and Colonel Glansberg was upset. He walked over to the photo lab, which happened to be right across the street, because they always wanted to be able to take the prints and run them over to headquarters. So he came over and he lined us up and he said, "I want 6 volunteers." He didn't even tell us what it was. I thought, well, that must be exciting. I'll step up. So I did. I was a tiger at 21. So 6 of us stepped up because they were, the photo lab had 2 or 3 men from each squadron, see, but they lived down at the group headquarters and worked in the lab. So then he told us, he explained why we didn't have pictures and why we must have pictures, and he would assign the extra man, you, to a certain spot in the flight plan. And so you were to shoot a photographic record of your flight, see, tail end Charlie. So that was the format, and it wasn't any more complicated than that, really. And so it wasn't very long. Now, I'm talking about early 1944, April, May kind of thing. And I was going to show you one of my pictures, best pictures of.
We can get that later. We can get that later.
Yeah, okay.
So you are now part of the crew.
Not any crew, just whatever they picked for tail end Charlie that day.
Right.
I never knew most of these guys.
Yeah, right.
Because I'd never seen them before. And they hustled me out there in a Jeep, and the camera repairman had already installed the camera, so all I had to do was just get in there. But I also, they gave me no training. Here's wartime, say. No training, and I didn't know how to hook the oxygen mask onto the line. The guy said, "Oh, you'll do this and do that." Then he says, "Did you ever wear a flak suit?" And I said, "No, what's that?" Those coats of mail, you know. And you couldn't put them on by yourself. You had to, they have to be snapped up here, and they're very heavy. So each guy has to help the next guy on with it. So I got into that. And then he says, "Are you on the radio yet? You have an intercom?" "No." So they must have thought I was the dumbest guy in the world. You know, how come we're saddled with this oddball? He's going to be a hex on us. I'm sure they felt that way.
Plus, they didn't know who you were.
They didn't know who it was. It was all just like a cold dash of water in the face. But anyway, I staggered through the first 4 or 5 missions. Then pretty soon I was the older guy. I knew how to do these things. Helped the next guy on with his flak suit, his helmet, and everything, so things went well, really. As I look back over it, they were very tedious at the time, but we were getting the job done. And they didn't even tell me what kind of a photo record they wanted. You know, like a progress report when you're building a building, they call it a progress report, and that's the way I looked at this thing a little bit. How many pictures do I take? And so I had to experiment a little bit. I thought, well, I can't take too many. I could take too few, but it was a 50-foot roll of film, 9 by 9. That's a nice big negative to work with. So we printed contact prints, you see, for those 9 by 9s, and that's why the detail was so good in them. They were Fairchild cameras, and they were beauties. Then we had a little hand camera. I say little, it's about so big, called the K-20. And those were the shots that you took out the window, the obliques, as they call them.
You would take pictures of other aircraft.
Yeah,
in the
well, the
air.
Formations, and
Okay.
maybe another one dropping his load of bombs, like my picture in Stephen Ambrose's book. just a typical shot like that, is dropping the bombs. And so most bombs were dropped on lead, by the way. The lead bombardiers, he set the thing, and it would deviate some, I'm sure, in time, but many times that's what it was. And so I finally settled on about 13 or 14 pictures. Click, 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 moving the camera. See, this is what the gunners didn't do. They didn't take the camera and move it back over through the sequence because they didn't know. See? You get it back about it. I'd take about 2 of bombs away in the air. I'd hear it over the intercom. Bombs away. So I'd be sit there. I'd pick up the first one maybe 50 yards below the ship or so, and then I'd wait for another few seconds till it got done. About the 3rd bomb I would catch striking on the ground. Then the bombing pattern would begin. Boom, 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 boom. And they already had the recon pictures, of course, before. All Europe would have been mapped, and so they'd be able to look at my picture and say, oh, well, there's a string of bombs right across that cracking plant at the refinery, or across the tank works, or across the ME-109 plant in Austria. And so that's why, and they, of course, they're waiting with bated breath for these pictures, which we knocked out and even wet in a tray and took them over to headquarters. You know, their chief bombardier, chief navigator, the squadron leaders, and Colonel Glansberg would all be gathered around these, you know. So they would try to interpret as to the success. And they have a way of measuring, I think it's within 1,000 feet, what percentage of bombs fall within that perimeter. So, as I said, 13, 14 pictures, and I had a record. By that time, we were practically turning off the target, see.
Were there other photographers that you associated with during this period of time who you would be able to say, well, look, you know, I did these 13 pictures. How many do you do? Was there any kind of...
Yeah, we all lived together. When I say together, we lived at headquarters. But we were kind of scattered around in different tents.
Well, the reason why I asked you is because you had said that, first of all, the bombardiers really didn't know, or whoever it was that was doing the photography before really didn't know how to do it. So your commanding officer was not happy with that. So they
well,
brought you
I
in.
wasn't trying. Maybe somebody knew, but they didn't tell me.
Right, but you figured it out.
Well,
I'm just
yeah.
wondering if you talked to anybody else who maybe did it a little bit differently or not.
No.
Okay, that's
now
all.
that I
That's all
think about it, and I don't know why. You know, did you take 13 or did you take 15 pictures? You know, we just. I think it was kind of an automatic thing, and I would say we roughly did about the same thing.
Well, obviously they were satisfied because every time you brought pictures over, they were pouring over them. They weren't saying, well, what
That's
about
right.
this, Jim? What about that, Jim?
Yeah.
So apparently you
That's-
must have been doing
I
something
think
right.
you could make that conclusion. Yeah.
Okay. All right. During these missions, you said you were the tail end Charlie.
Pardon me?
You said that during these missions, you were always the tail end Charlie. But,
Yeah.
But there's still flak going on, isn't there? There's
Oh, well, tail end Charlie just means that you're not right in the front.
I know.
You're right here though, but you know your gang's all around you. So, but as we used to joke, we used to say, well, by the time they get to us, why all the German gunners have the range, which is sort of a semi-truth.
Well, in terms of battle, though, I mean, you'd never been in battle before. You were a photographer, right? You weren't
Yeah,
involved.
no.
So
no.
what was the first few missions like, where all of a sudden bombs?
Well, they were
going?
scary, yeah. They were scary, but it's the old deal again where you start your process and you hear the flak coming through the wall of the plane, you feel it, and you think, geez, I concentrated on this. And that's where I developed this 13 picture thing. I was just like an ottoman or something, you see. And no matter what the hell was happening, I wanted that sequence to be good.
See, that's what I was getting at. You know, you talk to the gunners, you talk to the navigator, you can't focus on what's being shot at you. You've got your job to do.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's impressive to me that you're sitting there and you're trying to count off those numbers, and then bullets are flying and all that. No, you've got to concentrate.
After one or two sessions, I determined, now this is going to be my pattern, and it was.
Yeah.
And it worked out, and no matter what happened, and you'd feel it, the flak would come up, you'd feel the old B-24 rocking and rolling, you know. You think, oh, Jesus, I just hope a hot one doesn't come right into my corner here.
In addition to the bomb photographs, and you said you also had a smaller camera that you took pictures of.
It's a K20.
Okay. Did you take pictures of battle? Of actual action?
Well, there's a few times I tried to do that, but it all happened so fast it was over. Those ME-109 took go like this, you know. No, the only thing I did mostly was just formation shots and so forth.
I guess that's what I was getting at, is there's no way you could have captured that. If an airplane's flying by, you can't just suddenly wait there for the airplane and then take a picture of it.
Well, and it's like the guys in fighters, and I think some of the bombers may have had GAZAP cameras. That's called GSAP, they call it GAZAP. Gun Sight Aiming Point. But I never, and that was like a little movie camera. It looked like a little Kodak 16mm thing, but I had no contact with that at all.
Now, the missions that you flew were over what part of the...
8 countries, from Greece to France. But mostly up and down from the Balkans north as far as Poland. Northern Italy, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, southern France, and 1 or 2 missions they had over as far as Greece, because the Germans had panzer divisions over there. That brings me to a story too.
Yeah.
The Germans were transferring some of those panzer divisions. They had 1 or 2 over there to Yugoslavia, because they had Yugoslavia pretty well occupied. All the highways and all the cities were all under German command. The only thing that harassed them was Tito and the partisans, and the Chetniks under General Mihailovich. But somehow they got into eastern Yugoslavia. They got stalled for fuel, which happened to the Germans. It happened in North Africa. It's happened several places. They get strung out too thin. And there they were, sitting ducks. And so they decided to send 40 or 50 B-24s over there to demolish them, which they did. And I remember, I knew we carried 100-pounders and 500s and even 1,000-pounders. We could carry 2,000-pounders. But I remember the guy saying, one of the gunners saying, Jesus, we're carrying those goddamn frags. I didn't know what a frag was. And it's a cluster bomb. It's like bananas, see? And it's hanging by a little tiny tendril of a metal clip. And they don't get dangerous till you open the bomb bays. Because these things are like this, see? And if one of them breaks loose, you're a fireball. It's the end. And the guys knew that. I didn't know that, but they said, we're carrying frags along with one of the other squadrons or something, and it's an anti-personnel thing. It just tears the hell out of everything near ground, at and near ground level. So we carried frags, and we just cleaned out that Panzer division. Jeez, I never saw a picture. All I had was the roll that I ran on that, but it didn't show the whole thing was strung out. See, and
do you actually have photographs of that?
I don't know.
Yeah, but you were the one that took it.
Yeah.
So they destroyed the entire Panzer line, so to speak?
So to speak.
Wow.
And then the other story I was going to tell, did I mention to you about the shuttling the gas for General Patton?
Let's hear about it.
That's a great story because, and I just am never able to talk to anybody about that. Here we had the whole 15th Air Force for 2 weeks. This is my understanding. Flying gasoline in 50-gallon drums in the Bombays or the B-24s from Toretta Field at Chernola to Lyon, France, which is the third largest city in France. And it was a shuttle, and the guys go up and back, just the pilot, co-pilot, and the engineer, and the load, see? And they go up there and turn around and come back, and...
Well, they were landing, right?
oh, yeah, landed
okay, yeah.
at Lyon.
Okay, and then unloading all this gasoline for Patton.
Because Patton had already been through Lyon, but went around the city. That's the funny part about it. He didn't want to get bogged down in the city, I guess. Well, so Glassberg asked me to take pictures of the marshalling yard, which was huge. And we'd had missions there, and he partially or wholly destroyed that.
Now, what is a marshalling yard?
Well, rail yard.
Okay.
In the terminology of the military, it's called the marshalling yard. Yeah, it's just a big rail yard.
Mm-hmm.
But
the Germans were using.
They have big ones in Europe.
Yeah, but these were the Germans. This is where the Germans were their supplies and all that. You needed, and we were trying to.
They had been pushed out of there by Patton.
Oh, okay, all right.
And his troops went around, and they had him on the run, headed back toward the Rhine, and then he ran out of fuel. And I smile to myself every time I tell this, because I can just see Patton with his whip walking up and down and cussing like nobody ever heard before nor since, you know. And so for 2 weeks, that's what they did. And they had to, of course, work them. They were up north of the city, I don't know how far, but they had to shuttle them in trucks up there. And so Chuck Dines and I, he asked Chuck Dines, who wrote our news stories
Mm-hmm.
for Wing and for headquarters at Barry, and Stars and Stripes, and things like that. So he said, well, you take the pictures, Jim, and get stuff from different angles and so forth, and then Chuck, you write up, talk to some of the city officials, get a hold of the mayor, and people like that, if you can find them up there, because it was a big city, see. And so that's what we tried to do in 2-3 days. And the people were almost starving, and they were gaunt looking, and Chuck and I talked about it. He said, God, at least we could get them some C rations and K rations. So we told all the guys from then on, bring back barracks bags full of these things. These people are starving to death. So they did, and they greatly appreciated that. And Chuck and I, he found some people to talk to, some government officials there. And I went around, I not only took pictures of the marshalling yard, but in my book there I have a picture. See, the Rhone and the Saône rivers come together. It's quite scenic right there. But the Germans had destroyed something like 17 bridges in the next couple of miles. There was only one bridge left. And I can show you what I'm talking about later if you want to see it. Anyway, we did that little mission. Chuck, by the way, he had a stroke. He's laying in a place down here right in Washington. Just a tragic case. He's a good reporter, been on the San Francisco Chronicle. So that's the shuttle story. And when we finally got the gas up there and got them rolling, and of course they kept pushing the Germans back, and the big drive really never quit. It just stayed on.
It probably would not have happened if you guys hadn't been able to get that gas.
It probably not in that quantity. Who's going to do?
I wonder if he ever would credit the Air Corps for doing that.
I don't know. Well, and I don't know where all this gas came from. I never found that out. Yeah. Probably Naples, because that was our big port. See.
What other stories stick out for you in terms of your adventures while you were out there?
Well, a real fun story was I was due to get my R&R time. See. And
about what period of time was this?
Oh, this was in early '45.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I had a couple missions in January or early February, but then that was about the time when this came up, and they said, "Well, you got this Isla Capri thing, and some people go to the Riviera, but there's a crew here minus a man. He got sick or something, and they're short one crew member. Would you like to go to Cairo?" I said, Jesus, I'd love to go to Cairo. And so, okay, they introduced me, and I got on with those guys. And what they did is they flew down to the North African coast and then just followed over to Alexandria and then into Cairo, see. And so everybody had to take a hand at flying the B-24. And I know I knew nothing, and I think most of those guys knew nothing about it. So here we had that old B-24 weaving and a rocking and a rolling, not being sensitive to controls and trying to match, rudder with stick and so on. But we had a great time. They were a fun bunch, and Cairo was a week, 10 days of the most fascinating thing I've ever seen in my life. It's hard to tell people, especially now. Cairo is degenerated. It's a dirty place now, and nobody comes home raving about it.
Well, what was so special about it for you?
I tell you what, it was special because just before the war, that was pretty much British mandated around there. That's when part of the problem with the Palestine and all that right now, people say it goes back to those days. But it was spick and span, and the war never touched Cairo, see, or Alexandria. They cut Patton off, at El Alamein. So here they had the British more or less orderliness, and they had all the ships going through to Russia, taking all the machine tools and everything. The place was as spectacular as you could be in a commerce way. Everything was neat and tidy, as all the goods of the world were there. You want to have a suit made, have it made in 2 days right there. The best, British fabrics and that kind of stuff, for instance. And one of the guys and I went to the USO Club one night, and we met this nice girl there, a hostess, and she said, why don't you fellows come to my house for dinner? Can you make it this week? Oh, sure. We went, and she lived like a queen. She had her own cook, and she lives right on everything's around the Nile River. See, everything comes and goes, and the Nile River is where you meet your friends, and at the rowing club, for instance, that's British too. Yeah, sure. They have tea dances in the afternoon. And anyway, she had this nice little place. It's kind of on a little peninsula and beautifully furnished. So we had a great dinner with her. And I still remember she was from Milwaukee, and she was very kind to us. And we didn't buy anything much, no use buying much stuff, One kid on the crew, he was Jewish. And so he wanted to go to Tel Aviv, and he talked to the skipper about that. And he said, well, yeah, we can. That's kind of on the way back. So we landed at Tel Aviv. They're very surprised to see a B-24 come flying in there. I can remember sitting on the walk. It is right on the Mediterranean. I didn't know that before. Sitting there with our feet conked up on the rail, watching the sea roll in, drinking beer, and so that was kind of a fun. The whole trip was just exciting to me, because I saw nightclub acts and things there I've never seen. These guys with scimitars, great big scimitars, they'd dip them in an oil thing and they'd toss them in. The things would make 3-4 loops, and the other guy would grab it by the handle and he'd throw his at the same time. Just things like that. Things out of the Middle East were, especially me at 21, and never really been anywhere. That was an exciting time. Well, I was excited when I was sighted too.
Sighted?
Yeah, with the DFC.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, that's the reason for that jacket, really. It's a sentimental thing, because that's the ship I was in, Rough Rider. And as I said, I had, if not the only ones, mostly of the good pictures of that mission to August 17th. I remember, because that was the last mission that the 461st flew, I think.
Mm-hmm. Where did the name Rough Rider come from?
I don't know,
okay.
Because it was a crew that I didn't know.
Oh,
once again,
yeah.
I'm a stranger in the group. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to talk to Hughes and see if he has found anything about that crew of Rough Rider.
Okay.
I did find a guy yesterday. We were just talking about. He saw my jacket and he said, "Oh, I knew the crew chief of that, Ray Nance or something from Cleveland, Ohio." And I said, "Do you think he's still alive?" No, he says he's gone. So I still don't know anything about it. But
I would talk to Hughes. Definitely talk to Hughes. Talk to Hughes.
Yeah.
He'd be able to help you out. So
Yeah.
tell us about this mission then. The Rough Riders mission.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was Palesti, and you know, they didn't aim at you. They just put up a wall of fire. That was Palesti. They had so many guns that they just created this. It was no exaggeration. It was just a wall. You're just lucky if you made it through. See, and in my book too, I have. See, do I have it in that book? Yeah, I think I do. It had how many times we went to Palestine, how many people we lost, how many planes we lost. It's all in there. And right next to a little quotation that I have in there from Albert Speer. Do you know who Albert
Sure.
Speer was?
Yeah.
The master genius mechanic.
Nazi. Yeah.
Okay. His quote is, after the war, "The major demise of the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe was a shortage of fuel." Palesti. One of the key factors in it. So the 15th Air Force can be pleased and proud to have that recognition, I think.
So what was the last mission for you though? What were you said the Rough Riders?
Oh,
mission?
there's a couple of, well, yeah, that's August 17th, but I flew some into the fall, and I think I had one in January. I'm not sure if I have my list with me or not, but it was, there was a couple of milk runs up in northern Italy and into southern Switzerland there, right? It didn't amount to much. And
But the August
I
one.
did one thing. We were playing around. I did a night mission one time. We were playing around with infrared film and trying to photograph through, because we had a lot of cloudy conditions, see, and sometimes that would interfere with getting good crisp pictures. And I wouldn't get them. The guy behind me would get. In the next squadron, he'd get a successful run. See, so that's why they had to have these men spotted around. And somehow I never really learned how many we flew at one time. I should know that, but I don't. And we lost. I have a picture in there too of a fellow, Pat Lucas from Milwaukee. Yeah, he flew on a mission over Yugoslavia. We went over Yugoslavia all the time because we were going up north, see. He got shot down over there, over Yugoslavia, and a week went by, 2 weeks. Finally a month went by. I said, "Oh, Jesus, Pat didn't make it." About 6 weeks, he walked into camp. We couldn't believe it. And he said, "Where the hell have you been?" I've been with the Chetniks, with General Mihailovich. And he said, "They finally worked me out to the coast and the German patrol boats. They were cruising up and down. The Germans didn't have any boats to speak of in the Adriatic, but the British had. So they brought in a lot of our guys who worked their way out one way or the other to the coast, and then they'd bring them over to Barry, 15th Air Force headquarters."
So
I know what I want to tell you about. Have you ever heard of the island of Vis, V-I-S?
no.
Well, it's in an atlas.
Mhm.
Right, about halfway down Yugoslavia, Split is a big city, and Dubrovnik. Well,
Yes.
it's right in there. Then there's a whole series of little islands out off there, and the farthest one out is called Vis, V-I-S, Vis. And in fact, they said, we never saw them, but they said even Marshal Tito came out there to get away from it. Got too hot on the mainland, see. Because they were constantly harassing the Germans behind the lines. Well, anyway, that became known in the 15th Air Force as Rescue Isle. For the guys who couldn't get back over the Adriatic, 1 engine, 2 engine, hydraulic shot out, for a number of reasons, they couldn't make it back over. Usually a shortage of fuel. And that's what it was in our case that I was on. We got there and we'd been smacked up in Vienna. Vienna was a rough hot spot. They had so many fighters around, hundreds of fighters. And so we got there and we'd been hit, and I didn't know. I knew one engine was out, and I knew the hydraulics for the ailerons and stuff were just flopping out there in the wind. And we said, we're not going to make it over the Adriatic, that's for sure, I don't think. He said over the intercom, and said, so finally we got to where the little island was. So here we were in a group circling. I don't know how many, maybe 6, 8 planes, something like that, B-24. And there was a fighter or two even. They're running ragged. And so here we are, and you have to wait for, it was so primitive, they have ground control. He has a green and red gun, see. The green means, yeah, you can come in. The red means keep circling. So that's what's the story on that. And we circled a couple of times, maybe 2 times or so. Skipper said, we've no more gas. We've been running on fumes the last 10 minutes. I'm going to head this thing out to Adriatic, and you guys get your chutes on, and you jump, and I hope you hit the island. Sweat? Never sweated as hard in all my life, because I'd never even made a parachute jump. Not even a practice from a tower, you know? So here we are, clamping them on, and all huddled up there against the bulkhead. And then he said, oh, we got the green light. So we got the green light and went down. I don't know how I ever got that. It was a muddy little short strip. It was almost a death trap, that thing. And at the end of it, here was this big junk pile of old planes that didn't make it, couldn't make it, couldn't get out of there. And they didn't have any elaborate way to repair planes. There's nothing like a service squadron. They call it some, I don't know what they call that little squadron, but there's a little handful of guys there to do it. So we got down and landed, and the partisans really control it, Marshal Tito's partisans. And so they had little food, not much to eat, but we had a few rations on the coast. I slept in a cave for 2 nights. There was some little shacks and houses and things, but quite a few people, see? And I remember one of the partisan girls, God, she was tough as nails. She was just like a man. And she brought us around this, what they call rakia. And it's dynamite. It's some sort of a plum brandy. I don't know. About 2 swigs of that, you forgot about everything. So that was my little adventure on Beast. And it's in my National Geographic Atlas now, and I always wanted to go back and see if I could relive that a little bit, but I never have been able to get. For a long time, they wouldn't let anybody go there, and I don't know why. They said, "Oh no, the ferries don't run there." I asked her when I was in Europe on a trip back about 15, 20 years ago.
So where were you when VE Day, Victory in Europe, was announced?
I was in New York City.
Really?
I was on leave. I think I had 30 days or something. And when I went through photographic school, it's at 34th Street and 34th Avenue. It's 2 stops out on the subway, so we were off every night at 5 o'clock, so we got to know Manhattan real well. And at the USO Club, I had met this girl, and I thought, well, there's one contact I can look up. And she worked for NBC News. And I was talking to her, and we were trying to work out a dinner date thing, as a matter of fact. And all of a sudden, this bell rang. Oh, it was loud. Just shut it, paralyzed your ears. And I said, geez, what's that? Oh, she says, that's the one we've been waiting for. That's the VE Day. Oh, she left and I never saw her again. She had to dash for her office and, you know.
Well, what did you see out in the streets of New York?
Oh, well, we love to be in New York, you know, in Central Park, and we even made some films. everybody had to make a movie of something in Central Park, feeding the seals or.
Yeah, but I mean on VE Day.
Oh, VE Day. No,
Yeah.
I was on rest leave. I
But
told
you were in New York.
Yeah.
But what happened? It's VE Day. There's people in the streets. What did you see?
10 minutes.
Well, I left right after that.
I know, but on the day itself.
Oh, well, of course,
was
Times
Square.
Yeah, I was in the Rockefeller building.
Well, then what did you see?
Well, pandemonium.
That's what I wanna hear.
That's all I saw, pandemonium. People were running like this. Everybody seemed to have 10 places to go at once. That's the best way I know how to describe it. I thought, well, it's finally. I kind of smiled to myself in satisfaction that it's finally has come. The day we've all been waiting for is here. And if anything, I just kind of relaxed. I didn't get excited about it. I was excited that it happened, but my reaction was of relief.
What about VJ Day?
Let's see, what was the date on that? Do you remember?
November?
I don't remember.
Yeah, okay.
VJ Day was, I was sent out then to California after that, to Santa Ana Air Base. And I was there 3, 4, 5 weeks, not even that long. And then I had an option to leave the service at Camp Atterbury, Indiana, where I went in. So I took that and went home. And my folks lived in Cleveland, or a suburb of Cleveland. They had since bought a little hotel up at Jamestown, New York, at Lake Chautauqua, and so I helped them pack and get moved up there. And they lived there for some years.
What was the reaction of your coming home? You were in uniform, I take it, when you were.
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell us what happened.
Well, when I came home, when I left there and went to college and into war, we were living on our little farm. So I had grown up and graduated from a little high school in a farm town called Chardon, Ohio. And but when I came back, they were living out in a suburb of Cleveland, and we had a little gathering of my relatives at the time, a little welcome gathering for me. And I had a brother and a sister, and my brother had been in the service in the Signal Corps too. But no big elaborate things on VJ Day, except that we were relieved that Truman okayed the big one, and finally going to get rid of the Japanese menace. But,
I guess I was going to ask you those.
Nothing special.
But when you came home, in one piece, you're safe. What was that moment like? That reaction of seeing your
Well,
mom and
it was tearful. It was tearful because my relatives had gathered at my folks' home in a suburb of Cleveland, and they stayed overnight. We had some, we put them up, and it was just a family gathering, and I guess I was too shy to want to make much out of it. I'd like to keep it low key, and it's kind of what it was pleasant, but not much more than that.
I guess you'd say subdued, but everybody was
Yeah.
very happy that they're
Yes.
all together.
Yeah, and I remember unpacking my bag and my barracks bag and one thing and another, and thinking, oh yeah, I forgot I had these, and I had a few pictures. Well, yeah, 9x9s. I had a pretty good stack. Most of those I've already sent down to Hughes, and I've made some for the guys, and like that were on those missions, like this one. This is one of my favorite pictures that I took.
Let's go over these later. That's a beautiful picture, by the way.
Yeah,
I got about 2 minutes left. I just want to ask you one last question. How did the military experience you went through, the experience you went through, affect the person that you are today? The rest of your life, in terms of that period when you were that young man, but now you've lived to be 80 plus years old. How did that experience?
It did not leave, first of all, what it did not do, it did not scar me as it did many. There's some today from Afghanistan. They've got mental problems, they can't sleep, I don't know what all that encompasses, but it surfaces every once in a while. But I felt I was so darn lucky to get through without a scratch. And I've had gunners hit right next to me, practically. We had a navigator, one slug went right through his neck and killed him instantly, for instance. And there was not much going on. It was what we call a milk run. That's a minimum or no guns on the ground. So, and I think, Jesus, it could just as well have been me up there, riding there. So I was relieved. I thank the good Lord on that, but still do. That I was blessed with safe. And when things would get a little bit tight or something, I always remember my mother. She was able to quote from the Bible. And she had some things that's favorites that the kind of everybody knows, you know. And I knew that I had her prayers.
That was great, Jim. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Sure, you bet. You see, the thing about that picture, let me just tell you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
You see on the left side
Yep.
is that little kind of a winglet.
Sure.
Well, both of the waists were open
Yeah.
then. And it was about, oh, God, who knows, 30, 40 below?
Yeah.
And so, but I looked over the gunner's shoulder. I said, geez, let me get in and make a shot. So I had to pull my glove off. I remember I about frosted my hands.
Wow.
This K-20, like I was telling you
Yeah.
about. I thought, geez, there's the formation, there's the wing, there's the pitot tube, there's that one little skinny deflector up there, and that's a good shot.
Yeah.
You know, you see the elements come together just like you do.
That is so beautiful.
And that was in April or May, and not long after that, why they shipped these whole plastic windows for the waist, with a slot for the 50 caliber to fit out of it. See?
Yeah.
Well, that cut down it wasn't like a frigid Arctic blast in there, but it sure was at first. And then every once in a while, your electric suits. See, we had electric suits. And once in a while there'd be a break and there'd be a short.
Oh my gosh.
And here you are with a flak suit over it.
Getting shocked. Hey, it's 10 minutes to 7. You got your dinner thing to